Described as an architectural masterpiece of the 13th to 16th centuries, Westminster Abbey has been the site of every coronation since the ceremony held for William the Conqueror on Christmas Day in 1066, housing the remains of more than 3,300 notable figures, including 13 kings, 4 queens regnant, 11 queens consort and 2 other queens. The Abbey has witnessed 16 royal weddings as well as the crowning of 39 reigning monarchs. Under the guidance of King Henry III, who was crowned at the Abbey on May 17, 1220, the original church, enlarged by King Edward, later Edward the Confessor, was rebuilt in the Anglo-French Gothic style we see today. Keen to emulate the great churches then being built in France, he was considered exceedingly extravagant for spending £45,000, around 15 million in today's money, on its lavish decor. Plans included a shrine to the late King Edward and a theatre area under the lantern between the choir and the high altar. The church was consecrated on October 13, 1269, but sadly Henry died before building was complete. The old Romanesque nave remained attached to the new building for more than a century until it was pulled down and rebuilt from 1376. Though construction was largely finished during the reign of Richard II, the first king crowned in the present abbey was Edward I in 1274. Of all the monarchs to have assumed the throne in the years since, only 2 did not have a coronation. Edward V, the boy king who was believed murdered in the Tower, was deposed due to his parents' alleged invalid union. He was succeeded by his uncle, who was crowned Richard III in 1483. 453 years later, Edward VIII famously abdicated after a reign of only 325 days. He too was never crowned. In 1689, William III and Mary II were offered the throne as joint monarchs after accepting a Bill of Rights which limited the sovereign's power. During their coronation ceremony, the king was crowned in the ancient coronation chair commissioned by Edward I in 1296. A separate chair, which remains on view in the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Galleries high above the Abbey floor, was specially made for Mary. In 1761, George III's coronation was so long that members of the congregation began to eat a meal while the sermon was still in full swing. Despite arriving at Westminster Hall in sedan chairs at 11 a.m. and subsequently making the short walk to the Abbey, George and his wife Queen Charlotte were not crowned until 3:30 p.m. A hugely lavish affair, George IV's coronation in 1821 is perhaps best remembered for his refusal to allow his estranged wife, Caroline of Brunswick, to enter the Abbey. After trying every door, she eventually gave up and left. Costing a staggering £230,000, he had a new crown containing over 12,000 diamonds made especially for the occasion. According to historians, the aging and obese king, sweltering in his thick velvet robes, long curled wig and plumed hat, was forced to use no less than 19 handkerchiefs to mop his heavily perspiring brow. At the other end of the spectrum, William IV, believing the coronation too costly, had to be persuaded to hold a ceremony. After spending so little money on it and opting not to hold the usual banquet due to its expense, his crowning, held in 1831, became known as the Penny Coronation. Only 19 when she was crowned, Queen Victoria's 5-hour service reportedly suffered from a lack of rehearsal. The Archbishop forced her coronation ring onto the wrong finger. An elderly peer fell down the steps while paying his homage, and a confused member of the clergy wrongly informed her that the ceremony was over, when it was not. The occasion has since been dubbed the last of the botched coronations. All the same, Victoria described it as the proudest day of her life. "I reached the Abbey amid deafening cheers at a little after 11:30, she wrote in her journal. "I first went into the robing room quite close to the entrance, where I found my 8 train bearers. Then followed all the various things, and last the crown being placed on my head, which was, I must own, a most beautiful, impressive moment. The shouts, which were very great, the drums, the trumpets, the firing of the guns, all at the same instant, rendered the spectacle most imposing." By the time Queen Elizabeth II was crowned in June 1953, millions around the world were able to watch the ceremony unfold on television. Recollecting their great nerves, excitement and the unbelievable crowds, the Queen's maid said the scenes were incredible. Lady Anne Glenconner later mused as the Queen arrived, it was apparent that for her this was a solemn and religious occasion. But there were moments to make us smile, such as when one aristocrat knelt to pay homage and mothballs rolled from his robes. Entering the Abbey's annex ahead of the service, the Queen said, "Ready, girls?" Unfortunately, there was a problem. The carpet had been laid with its pile running the wrong way, which meant her robes had trouble gliding over it. She had to ask the Archbishop of Canterbury to help get her started with a push. So commenced the 3-hour service, watched in part by 4-year-old Prince Charles, who was seated in the royal box between his grandmother and his aunt. Few could have imagined then, 70 years ago this June, that the 27-year-old Queen would live to become Britain's longest reigning monarch. Now, her eldest son, King Charles III, is preparing to follow in a long line of kings and queens. On May 6, he too will take his coronation oath within the hallowed halls of Westminster Abbey. A symbolic occasion, rich in royal history and tradition, he will formally embrace his destiny, with his loving wife, Queen Camilla, firmly at his side.